My name is Amelia. The story I'm about to tell you is not something I can easily admit, but it left me with profound thoughts about emotions, responsibility, and the thin line between right and wrong. My husband, Greg, had left early that morning for a weekend business trip to Los Angeles. We lived in a small house by the beach in California with large windows that filled the space with sunlight and the soothing sound of crashing waves all day long. Greg loved his work, and I always supported him even though his frequent trips left the house feeling emptier each time he was away. I decided to make use of the quiet morning by cleaning the house and refreshing the space. I put on my favorite jazz playlist and started in the living room. The music from the speakers played softly, creating a calm, airy atmosphere that blended perfectly with the fresh ocean breeze. I wore a simple white t-shirt and a pair of denim shirts to move around comfortably. As I focused on dusting the high bookshelf where Greg kept some of his favorite decorations, I suddenly had the distinct feeling that someone was standing behind me. I turned around and saw Ryan Gregson from his previous marriage leaning against the door frame. Ryan had just come out of his room, his shirt messy and his eyes still carrying traces of sleep. "Good morning, Ryan," I greeted him with a smile, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "Morning," he replied, though his gaze lingered a little longer than usual. He stepped into the living room and sat down on the sofa, his eyes still following me. I tried not to pay too much attention and continued my work, but his presence made it harder for me to concentrate. We started making small talk about his internship plans and the projects he was working on. But when I reached up to adjust a picture frame on the top shelf, I didn't notice that I was unsteady on the small stool I was standing on. That stool wobbled slightly to one side and I lost my balance. "Amelia!" Ryan shouted as he rushed toward me. He wrapped his arms around my waist just in time before I could fall. In the quiet room, I felt the steadiness of Ryan's grip. We stood frozen. For a few seconds, my breath caught my chest as our eyes met closer than ever before. I felt the firmness of Ryan's embrace, but there was also a gentleness, as if he was afraid of startling me. My heart beat faster when I realized how close we were, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. I let out a small laugh to break the tense silence. "Good thing you were here." "I could have had Anasty fall," I said lightly. Ryan didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed locked on me as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't find that courage. His gaze was a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and something else. Something like admiration. I stepped out of his hold and adjusted my t-shirt, trying to regain my composure. Ryan still stood there, his eyes not leaving me. I turned to him and spoke in what I hoped was a casual tone. "Do you have any plans for the weekend?" Ryan shrugged, a faint smile forming on his face. "Not really. I'll probably just stay home and relax." I nodded and walked over to the sofa, motioning for him to sit with me. I needed a minute to calm down after nearly falling. Ryan sat down too, and suddenly the space between us felt smaller than it ever had before. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was quiet but comfortable. The sound of the waves outside drifted in, accompanied by the golden sunlight streaming through the large window. I glanced at Ryan and noticed that he was still watching me with that calm, steady gaze. But there was something different in it, something soft, something sincere. "I've always loved mornings like this," I say gently, breaking the silence, peaceful and unhurried. Ryan nodded, his voice quieter. "Me too, especially when there's someone to share it with." His words made me pause. His tone didn't sound like he was talking about something simple. I felt my heartbeat quicken. "Amelia, sometimes it feels like we understand each other without needing words," he whispered, his eyes still locked onto mine. I felt heat rising to my face. I shouldn't feel this way, but the way Ryan looked at me made everything feel hazy. Without thinking, I reached out and lightly touched his arm. That small touch seemed to make the air between us freeze. There was nothing but our breathing and a feeling that was impossible to put into words. "Ryan," I muttered, unsure, but I couldn't look away. Ryan didn't say anything. Instead, he gently placed his hand over mine, holding it as if to reassure me. In that moment, I knew we were standing at the edge of something far bigger than just a fleeting closeness. But before I could think any further, Helen in closer. I realized that he wasn't stepping back. Amid the morning sunlight and his warm breath, it felt as if the entire world outside had completely vanished. Ryan leaned in closer, and I couldn't stop myself from slowly leaning in as well. That moment felt like it stretched on forever as the distance between us disappeared. His breath brushed softly against my cheek, warm and impossibly close. I closed my ears, feeling as though every sound I shed disappeared. When his lips to Shenmin, soft yet full of emotion, a shiver ran down my entire body. That kiss wasn't rushed. It was gentle, as if Lilith knew we were crossing a final boundary. When we couldn't return from Dot, my heart pounded in my chest like it wanted to break free. I knew this was wrong. I knew I shouldn't be doing this, but in that moment my reason wasn't strong enough to resist the warmth Ryan brought. His hand slid gently across my cheek, pulling me closer as if he was afraid I might disappear. I could feel the strong and rapid beat of his heart. It matched mine completely. I reached up to touch his shoulder, feeling his firm frame and his breath quickening. As he whispered my name, Amelia, the sound of his voice made me shiver. I rested my head against his chest, feeling his arms wrap securely, tenderly around me, as if he wanted to shield me from everything outside off this world we'd created. His breath blended with mine, his warmth enveloping us in the gentle light of the room. I lightly brushed my fingers against his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath my touch. Ryan tightened his arms around me just a little more, his eyes reflecting a sincerity and longing that was impossible to deny. We both knew Thelene had been crossed. There was no longer any defense between us. Ryan lowered his head and kissed me again, this time deeper, more clear throat, passionate. His kisses made every wall I had built crumble. I ran my fingers through his hair, feeling my hands tremble under the weight of emotions I could no longer hold back. Outside, the waves continued their rhythmic song, reminding me of the world that still existed. But in that moment, all that existed for me was his breath, his heartbeat, and a closeness that felt as if we had belonged to each other for so long. I told myself to stop, but my heart wouldn't listen. I felt the warmth of his breath near my ear, his voice soft and trembling. I don't know what to do, Amelia. I can't stop thinking about you. I lightly touched his cheek, and in his gaze I saw that we were both swept away in this unspoken, overwhelming emotion. That sweet temptation had pushed us past fragile line, leaving me with a feeling of both fear and intensity, as if I had lost myself completely in his arms. I was almost lost in the haze between reality and overwhelming emotion. The warmth of Ryan's body and the sound of his heartbeat coursing through me blurred my reason even more. Every touch of his was gentle yet burning like a slow fire I couldn't extinguish. I felt his lips move along my temple down to my cheek where small beds of sweat shimmered, proof of finer turmoil within me. My whole body trembled, not out of fear, but because of a desire so real and forbidden. His fingers slid into my hair, gently brushing through it, as if trying to comfort and pull me even closer. I was lost in his eyes, the eyes of Semi Niang, yet filled with yearning and sincerity that felt almost cruel in its honesty. Amelia. His voice cracked on my breath, full of longing but also pleading for me not to turn away. I didn't know what decision I made in that moment. Everything felt like I was drifting down a rushing river with no way to fight it. My heart urged him to respond, heedless of the consequences. I closed my eyes again, feeling his breath near my neck. The steady beat of his heart in his chest, making everything feel like a dream. Yet deep in my mind, a faint voice whispered, "You've crossed the line." Even so, I couldn't stop myself. Ryan pulled me closer, his warmth wrapping around me like a protective blanket, making me forget the existence of everything else in this moment. "I never thought this could happen," Ryan whispered, his eyes glimmering with both uncertainty and joy because I hadn't pushed him away. "But I don't want to lose you or this feeling." His words felt like arrows piercing through me. I knew it should step back, but my hands still held his. Our breaths mingled, fast yet strangely peaceful. Outside, the sound of the waves continued, an unendingly that made our moment feel even more separate from reality. I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling both safe and terrified. Reality receded behind us like a curtain being pulled shut. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or awake. The boundary had faded away like a thin layer of mist. Then a sound broke stillness. The front door opened, followed by a familiar voice echoing throughout the house. "Amelia, I'm home." It froze as if I had just woken from a long dream. Both Ryan and I jolted as though pulled out of the safe bubble we had unconsciously created. My heart felt like it stopped for a moment. Ryan quickly let go of me, his eyes wide with panic. though they still carried something deeper, something neither. Ophis dared to speak aloud. My heart pounded so hard I thought my whole body might shake apart. The air in the room seemed to vanish as Greg walked in, his fist glowing with a cheerful smile, completely oblivious to the turmoil inside me. Amelia, his voice was warm and casual, the same way he always sounded when he returned home after a long business trip. I took a deep breath to calm myself, forcing my voice to sound steady. "I'm here," I called as I stepped out from the living room, trying to keep my smile as natural as possible, even though my hands still trembled slightly. Greg walked over, wrapping me in a hug and pressing a quick kiss to my forehead. "I missed you," he said, completely unaware of the tension that had gripped the house. I glanced over at Ryan. He was standing a few feet away in the living room, his hands stuffed into his pockets as if to keep them from shaking. Our eyes met briefly, but it was enough for me to sense the turmoil in his heart, a mix of guilt and an unextinguished longing. "Ryan, is that you?" "Come over and say hi to your dad," Greg said, cheerfully when he spotted him. Ryan took a long breath, studied himself, and walked over with a forced smile. "Hey, Dad, how was your trip?" Greg beamed, patting Ryan's shoulder with pride. "It went great. Everything went smoothly. I even brought back a few gifts for you both." I felt a lump in my throat when I heard the word Mom come from Greg's mouth. It reminded me that I was caught between two worlds. One filled with Greg's peaceful love and another tangled in the forbidden emotions that Ryan and I had just stepped into. Greg turned to me, his fist full of happiness as he talked about his meetings and funny stories from his trip. But his words only drifted past my ears. My mind was still trapped in that earlier moment when I'd have felt truly seen and desired in a way I never thought I would experience again. Ryan stood quietly behind Greg, his eyes still drawn to me as if trying to say something, but I avoided his gaze. I couldn't let Greg notice anything unusual. "I'll make us some coffee." "You must be tired," Greg offered with a smile and headed toward that kitchen, oblivious to the heavy silence hanging in the room. As soon as the kitchen door closed behind him, I turned to Ryan. "We have to stop," I whispered, my voice shaking. Ryan took a step closer, his eyes filled with pain. "No, but this feeling." He swallowed hard as though struggling to find words for something even he didn't fully understand. "Ryan, we can't go on like this. This family ... I clenched my hands together, holding on to the last bit of resolve I had. "This family is everything." Ryan was silent, his eyes reflecting a deep sadness. He nodded, but I knew we both understood that what had happened between us wasn't something we could easily forget. Greg returned with 2 cups of coffee, his smile as bright as ever. "You two look so serious. Nothing happened while I was away, did it?" I forced a laugh, light but not quite natural. "No, nothing at all. Just small talk," abruptly, reaching out to take the cup of coffee from Greg. Ryan smiled too. Both his eyes were still clouded with uneasy regret. He turned away and walked toward the large window overlooking Thesia, as if searching for a way to escape Heath's room that was now weighed down with memories. I sat down next to Greg, but familiar sense of happiness and peace had been shattered by a crack he wasn't sure I could ever mend. The warmth of his hand in mine couldn't quit the storm rising inside me. In the days that followed, a silent heaviness filled the air. I tried to keep everything as normal as possible, cleaning the house, preparing dinner with Greg, asking about his work as he always did. But in every quiet moment between conversations, I could still feel Ryan's eyes on me. Ryan avoided looking directly at me when Greg was around. But whenever we crossed paths in the kitchen, the hallway, or it sat on the porch, I felt the awkwardness and unspoken tension in every glance. One afternoon, when Greg went out to watch a game with friends, I stepped out to the backyard to water Thera's bush. The late afternoon sun filtered softly through the leaves, but my mind was still weighed down by thoughts I couldn't let go of. I heard soft footsteps behind me and immediately knew it was Ryan. My heart tightened, but I didn't turn around. He stepped closer, standing only a few feet away. "I just wanted to step outside and get some fresh air," Ryan said, his voice low and slightly awkward. I nodded, trying to focus on what I was doing, but my fingers holding the garden hose trembled. Ryan took another step forward, close enough that I could hear the soft sound of his breathing and the cool ocean breeze. "You're avoiding me, aren't you?" His voice was quiet but filled with urgency. I stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. I was afraid that if I said anything, everything would unravel. I know everything that happened. It's hard to accept that Ryan hesitated, his eyes filled with torment. But I can't pretend it didn't happen. I can't stop thinking about you. I turned to look. At him, and in his eyes I saw all the emotions I was trying to bury. Confusion, longing, and guilt tangled together. Ryan, we have to move past this, I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. His gaze faltered for a moment before returning to mine. Pained yet resolute. But I don't know how. When everything keeps replaying in my head, every glance, every moment makes me remember it all. I gripped the hose tighter until my knuckles turned white. I felt the same way. I felt the same way. Every morning into very night, I saw that moment as clearly as if it had happened yesterday, but I knew I had to stop. This family was everything Greg and I had built together. I took a deep breath, my eyes stinging as tears threatened to spill. Ryan, if you care about this family, about your dad, then we have to let go. He stayed silent as though fighting a battle within himself. Finally, he nodded and turned away, his shoulders shaking slightly as if he had just lost something precious. I watched him walk back into the house, leaving me standing alone in the fading twilight, feeling empty and aching in every part of my being. I knew this was the right thing to do, but the distance between us felt like it had torn a piece of my heart away. It stood still in the yard as the late afternoon sun dipped behind the horizon. The waves kept crashing steadily like a reminder of the patience and permanency of time. But inside me, everything was still swirling like an uncalmable storm. I knew that. Feeling hadn't disappeared. Every glance, every memory of Ryan was etched into my mind. But I also knew that if I didn't act, if I continued to live in this emotional limbo, everything would fall apart. That night in the quiet house, while Greg was sound asleep, I sat on the couch staring out the large window. The vast night ocean stretched before me, but my thoughts were tangled and restless. The next morning, I decided it was time to end the suffocating tension once and for all. I walked into the kitchen where Ryan was sitting, his eyes immediately lifted. When he saw me, perhaps he already knew that this conversation was inevitable. I sat across from him, my hands clasped at a jar to keep them from trembling. Ryan, I began, my voice soft but firm. We can't keep doing this. Ryan nodded slowly. VIDIQ. Logo views.